Chapter 8. Wait, the competition was beginning tonight? Annecy had said this party was about schmoozing, drinking, and eating. Where was the giant Hunger Games cornucopia when I needed one, so I would at least know what I was supposed to do? The crowd hooted in excitement. I shifted uncomfortably. I hoped the room wasn't about to go into wolf mode, like at the club. I doubted my nerves could handle that. The gorgeous blonde hostess raised her voice until it rang out over the crowd. I'm Tina, winner of the last full moon games for my pack in the eastern part of the state. It is my pleasure to help bring so many different packs together for such an important competition. Friday, on the night of the full wolf moon, one lucky winner will be chosen to be your alpha's new bride. Ready to meet the contestants? The room erupted with excited noise. Olivia Emmett is our first contestant in the full moon games. She is at the top of her class as well as an accomplished archer and is part of the wolf pack from Mississippi. Olivia, one of the ladies in our line, was a thin woman with long hair the color of ice that fell beautifully down her back. Her deep blue ball gown swept over the floor as she stepped forward confidently while waving to the crowd like she was a queen. She returned to the line after the applause died down. Jenny McMillan, the hostess announced. She is the swim champ at the University of Georgia and works as a humanitarian. She's also her pack's chief babysitter. Jenny was dressed in a flowing red gown that ended just below her knees and accentuated her ass. She had dark brown hair that was curled to frame her pretty face. She glanced at me with a smirk before she stepped forward, her green eyes ablaze. Sloan Phillips, junior class president at the University of Florida, high school homecoming queen, and at the tender age of 4, she was already an accomplished award-winning actress. As most of you know, she is part of Florida's Wolfpack. The crowd gasped. She was stunning in all her glory with a white gown covered in sparkling sequins. Her team had done well because she already looked like a bride. She stepped forward and spun around like a model on a runway before winking at the crowd. Wow. I could never compete with her in a million years. Even if I wanted to. She was obviously the most accomplished, and she had great boobs. She should just be declared the winner right now, and then we could all go home. I zoned out as the other girls were introduced alphabetically by last name and gazed around at my escape options. Squeeze through the barred windows? Barrel through the guarded front door? Harlow Vale, the hostess announced. She likes books. Sloan snickered. That was it? That's all they could come up with for me. I had to admit that I wasn't at the top of my class or the homecoming queen, but still. How about state championship wins in the 400, 800, 1600, and 3200 meter runs? Not once, but twice? I didn't get that track scholarship for sticking both thumbs up my ass. I took a few steps forward and smiled weakly at the crowd. They went completely silent as they stared up at me. A human stranger who didn't belong. Trying to distract myself from the obvious, I gazed around at faces until I found Connolly Jackson. Like he had at the club, he reminded me a little of James Bond, with his slicked back hair and suave sophistication. I couldn't take my eyes off of him because of the way he was looking at me, like a man in the grip of utter shock. He held up his hand and addressed the hostess. I'm sorry, but could you repeat her name? A buzz rippled through the crowd. Harlow Vale, the hostess said, enunciating each syllable. He nodded and looked at me with fresh eyes. It was like he knew me, but I had never met him before that night in the club. There was a sense of familiarity on his face the longer I looked at him, though, which puzzled me. As if to cover the awkwardness of the situation, the hostess waved her arm out to Connolly with a flourish. Connolly Jackson, everyone, father of Stride and husband to Jessa Jackson. To his right stood a slouched woman, who I guessed was Jessa Jackson, Connolly's wife. Was she not also Stride's mom? She wasn't even looking at the stage, but at a far-off spot in the room. She looked out of it, and I wondered briefly if she had drunk too much champagne. What was going on with this strange family? The hostess pivoted to a new topic, thank God, but I didn't hear any of it because of Sloane seething in my ear. Don't think sucking up to Connolly will win you any points, she hissed. You're likely in the negative by now. Since when was standing here sucking up? I shrugged and shook my head because I just didn't care. Why did she hate me so much anyway? Maybe it was because she knew exactly what I did, that I didn't belong there. The hostess seated the contestants at a table together, a large one to sit all 10 of us. I made sure to not be beside Sloane, but she managed to sit right across from me, so I still had to look at her while she glared lasers through my skull. Jenny sat on one side of me and smiled my way, giving me a little hope that I wasn't a complete social pariah. So, you like books? I do. I don't know why the hostess brought that up. It seems kind of silly comparatively. Not that I was comparing myself to any of these beautiful women. Nope. Jenny shrugged. I like books too, so don't feel bad. I smiled awkwardly. When I have spare time, that's what I do. Have you ever thought about getting into publishing or editing just so you can read all day long? Jenny laughed, and it sounded like crystals clinking together. That would be the perfect job. No, I admitted, a little stunned at myself. Why hadn't I ever thought about that before, for my near meaningless, directionless life? Reading is so boring, Sloane piped in from across the table. Bleh. I sighed. She just wouldn't quit. Is it because you can't read? Gasps circled the table as if no one had ever dared to stand up to basic bitch Barbie before. If she thought she could push me around, though, she was dead wrong. She glared at me, but I only returned a smile. One of the other girls whose name I couldn't remember spoke up. Okay, ladies, we don't have to be at each other's throats the whole time. Only one of us is going to win, but attacking each other isn't going to up your odds. She shouldn't even be here. She's not one of us, Sloane reminded everyone. Yes, but she is because Stride chose her to be. So he obviously doesn't care if she's a wolf or not. The girl leaned toward Sloane. So let it go. It's getting old. Oh, this was getting good. Sloane laughed haughtily. Fuck you, Charlotte. Like your opinion matters. Charlotte narrowed her eyes, but sat back in her seat. Ridiculous. It was ridiculous even trying to exist in the same circle as Sloane. I just hoped she would tire of taunting me, or otherwise I might have to kick her ass. At least figuratively. Using my words. I had to remember she was a wolf who might literally tear my throat out. Most of the girls whispered together in small groups, and I wondered if they were trying to build their own alliances. Could I rely on them to help keep Sloane's fangs away from me? Yeah, probably not. Waiters came around with some food, and my stomach instantly rumbled. I hadn't had a bite to eat since before the club party 2 nights ago, and I was ravenous. Plates were put in front of each of us, and I stared down at my meal, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. There was a sirloin steak in front of me, which I normally would have found mouthwatering, except it was raw. The waiter then placed a bowl of soup alongside the plate, and I recoiled with revulsion. Animal eyeballs floated in the soup. I had to avert my gaze before I started dry heaving. Sloane smirked. Is something wrong, Harlow? Ugh, you guys eat this? She scoffed. We're wolves. Carnivores. Did you expect us to eat salads? I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. I totally expected them to eat meat, but I imagined they'd at least cook it first. I wasn't going to be able to eat any of it. Even though my stomach was rumbling a moment ago, I had completely lost my appetite. A waiter walked by, and I motioned for him to come over. When he did, I asked him as discreetly as possible for some bread and butter, hoping I could at least keep that down. We have a moon run coming up, Jenny said to me once the waiter dashed off. What's that? I asked, reaching for my glass of water. We run when it gets close to the full moon, because it makes us stronger. For those who haven't shifted at all, it's an opportunity for them to complete their shift. It's a primal thing, connecting with nature and being one as a pack. That's wild, I muttered. That's all you have to say about it? Sloane demanded, her voice icy. I sipped my water for a moment, regarding her over the rim of my glass, and then set it down. I really don't know what else to say. I'm just learning about all of this now. I had no idea that this was real. I only read about it in books. Oh, yes, you like books. She rolled her eyes. Please, tell us more about that. Maybe it was the confusion, the dread, the absolutely revolting sight of eyeballs floating in soup, which people all around the ballroom were slurping up like it was a delicacy. Whatever the reason, I couldn't hold back what bubbled up from the simmering heat inside me. Why are you such a bitch? I shouted. You don't even know me. Several contestants and those at surrounding tables gasped, their eyes wide. Others started whispering animatedly to each other like they were soaking up every ounce of drama. Sloane was seething. I do know. It's pretty obvious. You know nothing of our world. The reason for that, Harlow, is you aren't part of our world. How are you going to marry a shifter when you can't even eat dinner with them? You don't belong here. Like I needed her to tell me. Like it was some huge insult. Like I didn't know my nickname might as well be Hot Mess Barbie. Fuck this. I wasn't going to sit there and listen to Sloane's acidic opinions while eyeballs floated around my soup bowl. Come get me when it's time for fucking dessert, I said as I got up from the table. A long, long pause followed as I walked away. Then Sloane snorted. God, what a freak of nature. Does she mean just dessert or literally fucking dessert? One of the other contestants asked. I moved out of the dining room to breathe fresh air and let them wonder. I found myself back in the hallway. It was as grand as the ballroom and adorned with reds and golds. It offered no comfort, but was better than sitting at that table. watched by floating eyeballs. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. I tried to steady my nerves, though I knew I didn't want to go back there. No one had followed me out. Maybe no one would notice if I left. I opened my eyes to do just that. At the same time, Ames turned the corner. "Ames!" I called out. Hope sparked in my chest for the first time since I'd woken up, as well as the sharp tug that happened whenever he was around, and that hauled me toward him. When he saw me, the first genuine smile I'd seen since I arrived here broke across his face. There he was, the god of the bookstore, now wearing a tux that did all sorts of crazy things to my heart. He strode toward me, his blue eyes heating as they swept up and down my dress. "Harlow, you look incredible. But god of the bookstore or not, he was the reason I was here." Ice flooded my veins as I curled my hands into fists. Was this all part of the plan to lure me in? Did you have to meet a quota of eligible girls to offer the great Wolfie Kingly alpha? Did you even like me when we met? Or was that an act? I never, ever wanted you here. You have to know that. He reached out and touched my arm, and that same current of power at the bookstore and the party coursed through my body. His touch made me feel alive, exhilarated, and throbbed a manic pulse between my thighs. I gasped and pulled away. Looking up into his eyes, I could tell he had the same reaction, a moment of pure intensity crossing his face. "Then help me get out of here," I demanded. "You owe me that at the very least." "I can't." "Why?" He grabbed me then and pulled me towards him, our lips only inches apart. My traitorous body melted against his heat. I should have been enraged with him. I should have been screaming and punching him for what he'd allowed to happen to me. But I could only imagine his mouth on mine, plundering it, owning it with his tongue, and then taking me right here against the wall. Maybe it was the tux, or the storm of desire in his gaze, or his flaming touch digging harder into my skin, but I wanted him. Heat flared in his eyes. His breaths grew ragged as he swept forward and caught me by the hips. The wall now at my back. The hard length of him pressed against my stomach. His reaction toward me unfurled a throbbing ache between my legs, and I ground them together, feeling my need soak into my panties. I moaned, though it was more like a breathy sigh. Slowly, he leaned in and skimmed his lips across my cheek to my ear, eliciting a shaky gasp from my throat. "You think I don't like you? Prove that you do," I whispered, and it sounded like I was begging, "Either fuck me or get me a phone." He stared, barely breathing, his hungry gaze heightening my desire. He tightened his hands into fists at my hips, gathering up the fabric of my dress and hiking it up my legs, almost to my center. Doing so bucked my hips into his, so I could feel every sweet inch of him. I whimpered for more. A growl rumbled from his chest into mine. He tucked his fingers under the bottom band of my panties and teased them closer to my aching center. As he did, his heavy, minty breaths fanned across my lips and cooled them. I inched closer to taste him, but then his eyes hardened into glaciers. cold as ice, and he released me, turned, and walked away. What the fuck? Only a second later, Stride came out of the ballroom, his blonde hair perfectly coiffed. He swept his gaze down the hall toward Ames, and then found me, a puddle of wanton heat, gasping against the wall. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously as he took my hand. Time to dance, Harlow. Chapter 9. I pulled my arm out of Stride's grasp, trying to shake off all thoughts of Ames, which was impossible. I'd never had a man rile me up so badly. Ever. And then for him to just leave like that. Well, he must have sniffed out that Stride was coming and would see us. What were you and Ames talking about? Stride asked, ushering me back into the ballroom. Nothing, I said calmly, even though my insides twirled at just the sound of his name. He barely said 2 words to me. Stride said as he led me to the center of the ballroom. I didn't care if he believed me or not. It appeared as if our dinner was over. The waiters cleared away the dishes. Thank God for small miracles. In the corner, a live band began to play classical, grown-up kind of music. Several people were already dancing when we joined them in the center. They moved with a grace I would never expect from, well, animals who ate raw steak and eyeballs. Yeah, I can't do this, I told Stride, and headed for the door again. And Ames. He stopped me with a tight grip on my wrist. Really? Ballroom dancing? It's not exactly my generation. How long have you all been alive? Did you even consider modern day dancing? He laughed. The first real sound I think I'd ever heard him make. Believe me, it's not my choice. The elders are in control of these events, especially my dad. Not me. I cringed as I looked at the experts around us. I suppose you're going to force me to dance with you, like at the club? No, I won't. He took both my wrists then, rubbing his thumbs gently across my overheated skin. I can teach you how to dance like this. It's not hard. Just relax and, what's the saying? Fake it till you make it? I smiled in spite of myself. He sounded kind of genuine. He cocked an eyebrow in question, and I shrugged. When in Rome, I guess. And it wasn't like I could just up and leave anyway. I'll be gentle. I promise. He pulled me into his arms, one hand on my waist and the other holding my right hand. My face flushed with embarrassment as Stride began to sway with me. I was so out of my element that it was laughable. We rotated in a counterclockwise direction around the entire floor, not just staying in one spot. Our movements together eventually flowed well, almost effortlessly, thanks in large part to him. It was actually kind of magical once I got the hang of it. A few couples to my left, Sloane looked like some elegant maiden who had danced like this her whole life. We made eye contact, and then she glanced at Stride. She looked back at me with a positively feral expression. She was mad at me for dancing with him, like it was my fault. Look into my eyes and center yourself, Stride told me. You're doing great. I swallowed thickly as I did so, but instead of Stride's face, I imagined Ames's. With him, we wouldn't be ballroom dancing. We'd be grinding on the dance floor, oblivious of other people's stares while his fingers worked their way slowly toward my... Ouch! Oh, sorry, I said, removing my foot from the top of his. Tried to warn you, remember? Stride smoothed his hands down my arms to help keep me steady in my heels. Yes, well, what you lack in dancing skills, you make up for in beauty. In a world of cookie-cutter people, you are refreshing. I quirked my eyebrow at him. Real smooth. He held out his hands, his photoshopped face brightening with what looked like a real smile. Just being honest, should we try again? Yeah, and maybe I could keep my mind off of Ames this time. We transitioned from one place on the dance floor to the next in a fixed pattern, and with a little more concentration, it was like I had always been a ballroom dancer. When one song faded into the next, Stride whispered into my ear, "Harlow, I want you to meet me in my room." I instantly tensed. Why? His fingers tightened where he held on to the center of my back. His lips skimmed the shell of my ear, and I shivered. So we can get to know each other better. I can't get to know you here? Obviously, I knew what he meant, and obviously, I wasn't interested. Not after forcing me to take part in a competition for marriage. Not after Ames had burned away thoughts of any other men with a single touch. His gray eyes twinkled. "Are you playing hard to get?" "Oh, I'm not playing," I assured him. He looked somewhat taken aback by that, like he wasn't used to such honesty. Good. Though, if I did meet him in his room, there was the possibility of finding an escape, or a phone, or someone willing to help me. The music changed rhythm, and partners peeled away from each other. Well, this is unfortunate. Stride slowly released me, his gray gaze locked on mine. Time to change partners. And then suddenly I stood alone. I turned around to see Ames behind me. With his lips pursed and the corners of his deep blue eyes tight, he moved in quickly and put his arm around my waist. The thrill of his touch funneled the air from my lungs. The nagging tug in my chest seemed to rumble out of purr. The rest of my body reacted as though he'd never left me in the hallway, aching for him. Instantly, my panties were soaked yet again. My nipples peaked to painful points, and his nearness curled between my legs and dared me closer to him. Did he even know or care what he did to me? "Seems like you and Stride are getting along quite well," he murmured. "What choice do I have?" I snapped. He looked away, the muscles in his jaw flexing. We continued to turn around the room, and I kept waiting for the music to signal a partner change again. I couldn't be held responsible for my actions while dancing with Ames. "What were you and Stride talking about?" he asked me. Funny. He asked the same thing about you and me. Ames flicked his gaze back to mine, his entire body pulling taut. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing," I told him. "You and I weren't saying a lot with words." His lips twitched at that, and raw, almost desperate hunger flamed brightly in his eyes. "Don't look at me like that," I said with a hint of a whimper. We circled the dance floor, and damn me to hell, it started to feel like we were the only two people in the room. In his arms, I forgot about mean girl Sloane, about Stride and his marriage games, and about how worried my mom must have been. I forgot it all as I looked up into Ames's eyes. He pulled me closer to him, his face near mine, his gaze a soft caress on my face. I couldn't even be sure we were dancing anymore. It was almost as if we were standing still while the dancing went on around us. "While you're here," he murmured, "I have to act like I hate you." "And do you?" His blue eyes narrowed as though that were answer enough. I sighed. Why do you have to act that way? He'll choose you out of spite, Harlow. Spite for me. He shook his head. He can't know about us. Awfully bold of you to assume there is an us after kidnapping me. We have parties like that every week. I had no idea Stride was going to start the full moon games then, because he said he'd wait. He hissed a breath out through clenched teeth. But you would be dead right now if Stride hadn't called your name at the club. What the fuck? I pushed him away from me as cold dread washed through my veins. The drop-dead, serious look in his eyes told me there were no lies detected in what he'd just told me. If I weren't here, trapped in a wolf-shifter marriage competition, then I'd be dead? Ames pulled me into the dance again, and I realized we were drawing stares as the others switched partners. I hadn't even heard the shift in the music. I tried to breathe, pretend everything was normal. Inside, alarms blared. I had to get out of here. After the bomb he'd dropped, Ames whisked us to the edge of the dance floor, out of earshot from the others. What do you mean? I whispered harshly. Is that why you invited? Of course not. His words held a real primal growl. His eyes, chips of ice weaved with hints of green and brown, captured mine as a scowl twisted his lips. If I would have known, I never would have invited you. Never, Harlow. Everyone, including me, thought the full moon games wouldn't be for another couple months. You have to believe that. I nodded. I did believe him. It aligned with what Annecy had told me about Stride wanting to wait until after his birthday to start looking for a wife. It's tradition to shift after the announcement of the full moon games. All the packs do it, but humans aren't supposed to know about us. All the stray humans there were killed. He swallowed hard, slaughtered, after we all shifted. After I'd fainted. Thank goodness for small miracles that I hadn't had to witness that. But oh my God, what a barbaric tradition. Why invite me? I said, my voice too breathless to make it sound like a question. Why did he have to invite me into a literal wolf's den? I'm human, Ames, I reminded him. And now I know. How am I not dead? Because Stride selected you. And if I don't win, then what happens? He made an anguished sound in the back of his throat, one that carved sharply into my heart. That was answer enough. I would die if I didn't win these stupid full moon games. It's because of my stepdad, Connolly. He glanced over my head, presumably to look at the man. He made the decision to start the games early. Your stepdad? I hissed. That would mean he and Stride were stepbrothers then. Nodding, he turned to me so I could see Connolly too. Across the room, Connolly stood with his wife off to the side of the dance floor. She was pulling away from him, tears tracking down her cheeks. It looked like they were arguing. And that poor woman who's running away from... That's my mother, Ames said, his voice strangled. My mouth popped open. After my dad's death, Connolly took my mom as his bride. A loveless marriage. That was plain as day, just looking at them. So, your dad was the alpha. Ames jerked his head in a stiff nod. Connolly marrying my mom was a way to be a protector over a broken family. His throat bobbed on a hard swallow, and I suddenly had the urge to hug this man. He'd lost his dad, and in some ways had lost his mom too, to an unhappy marriage. Then why aren't you the alpha? Because if the roles were reversed and I was suddenly competing to be Ames's wife, well, I might just try a little harder. A little. Only because this whole thing was really, really fucked up. I'm not related to my parents by blood. I'm adopted. His eyes narrowed over my head, two lethal, sexy points that could kill and devastate hearts with one sweep. And I'm not as easily manipulated as Stride is. And then it all made sense, in a way. Ames's dad, the alpha, was dead, and a new alpha needed to be chosen. Someone blood-related. For some reason, Connolly wasn't chosen, but he still wanted the alpha role. How better to have that role than rule through Stride? Just then, the dance ended, and Ames's hands dropped away from me like I'd burned him. "Go to your room," he told me, and then he turned and walked away. Stunned, I stared after him. Was that an order, or a warning, or a promise? Either way, he was the only person I trusted here. I made my way across the dance floor, dodging couple after couple, and hoping no one would try to stop me. Thankfully, no one did. On the way there, I tried door after door to see if they had any unbarred windows I could escape through. All of them were locked. Many of the other doors, and even some hallways, had guards stationed in front of them. There was no escaping here. At least, not yet. When I opened the door to my room, I stopped short. On the bed lay my cell phone, my eyes filled with tears and relief carved into my heart. Had Ames given it back to me? Was that why he wanted me to go back to my room? I lunged for it, and with shaking hands, I tried calling home. Mom. Same thing, really. There was no answer, even though Mom was a night owl like me. It was past midnight on a Sunday, but that shouldn't have mattered. Finally, her voicemail picked up. I only had a few seconds to come up with a cover story and control the knot of emotion in my throat that multiplied in size just thinking about her. "Hi, Mom. I lost my phone for a little bit, but somebody helped me find it. Too many details. She'd see through me if I didn't end this soon. I'm fine, by the way. Don't worry about me." Meanwhile, a ballroom full of wolf shifters danced below me. How surreal. I ended the call and sent a text to her with virtually the same message in case she didn't check her voicemail. Then I hovered my finger over the 9 in 911. One problem, though. I had no fucking clue where I was. Even looking out the window didn't tell me much, though city lights still glowed in the distance. Sure, the police could track my phone signal, but would they even believe me? Did I believe me? Plus, it was my word against everyone else's. I knew a thing or two about millionaires and books. They often had their hands in a lot of different people's pockets, including the police. No, without concrete evidence, I had nothing. So instead, I found the earlier text from Ames and sent him a thank you from the bottom of my heart. A second later, he texted back a thumbs up. The most passive-aggressive response ever invented. But in that moment, it made me smile. Chapter 10. I walked through the woods, the freezing air biting into my skin. I shivered as I looked down, confused. I wondered why I was only wearing a t-shirt and nothing else when it was so cold outside. I could already hear Mom asking me where my jacket was. "What are you thinking going out like that?" she would holler at me. She was right, of course. Mom was always right. I moved through the woods, and the howling of a wolf sliced through the air, stopping me in my tracks. I looked around, but I didn't see anything. Thoughts of being ripped apart and left for dead flashed inside my head. Did wolves leave people for dead? Or did they just eat them? I kept moving forward, trying to find my way out of the forest. What was I doing here anyway? There were no paths or lights to show me the way out. I seemed to get only deeper, further inside, and my skin prickled with unease. The howling continued, closer this time. I looked behind me, but there was nothing there but trees and more trees. I couldn't pinpoint where the sound was coming from. Just then, I stumbled through a break in the trees into a clearing. Fog clung with wispy fingers to the ground, so I couldn't see clearly, even with a full moon above my head. I picked my way across slowly, taking my time and keeping my senses sharp. When I was halfway through the clearing, movement flickered out of the corner of my eye. I froze, my pulse a jackhammer in my veins. Something told me to keep moving, that answers were just within reach. I kept going. The fog thinned some at the edge of the clearing. There were 2 people there, naked and writhing in the moonlight. I gasped, the sound lost to the sounds of the couple having sex in the middle of the woods. They weren't just having sex, though. They were devouring each other in every sense of the word. I told myself, "Don't be a creeper, Harlow." But the woman looked familiar. She looked like me. I whispered shakily, open, and I jumped a mile off my bed. The light switch flipped on, and Annecy rushed toward the bed, her pretty face drawn with concern. "Harlow, are you okay? I heard screaming." I covered myself in all evidence of what I'd been doing to myself while dreaming as much as I could with the covers. Just a dream, is all." She sat on the edge of my bed and let out a relieved breath. "What kind of dream?" "A dream about Stride," I admitted, but I wanted it to be about Ames. I'd come thinking it was Ames. We were having sex in the woods at night, on the ground. "Sounds kinky," Annecy said with a laugh. "Do you need anything? Water? A vibrator? Anything?" No. Although I did think twice about the vibrator offer. "I just want to get some sleep without any weird dreams." Annecy nodded and stood like she was about to go. On the back of her blue, plushy robe was a mandala symbol, or maybe it was a full moon. At the door, she turned. "You know, dreams can sometimes be a view into the future." I snorted. "I don't doubt that. He already propositioned me at the ball, but I turned him down." "Why?" She was looking at me carefully, as if trying to see if I was going to lie. Not that it was any of her business. I just don't drop my pants for anyone, or fling up my ball gown, as the case may be. Although I'd sure come close for Ames, hadn't I? It's okay to be pulled in by him, you know. He has that effect on women. He gets inside your dreams. He takes what he wants. She licked her lips as she stared off into the distance, a lustful glint in her eyes. That's just what he does. What all alphas do. They basically do what they want. This sure sounded like she was speaking from experience. If she wanted him so badly, Why wasn't she in this competition? What are you saying? I asked. Is he not faithful? Not that I cared. Not while I was pining over someone else, someone I wasn't competing to marry. Annecy shrugged. Every alpha is different. There are no set rules. They just do what they want. Stride has never had a committed partner, so it's hard to tell whether he would be faithful. But until he actually makes a commitment, he's definitely going to do what he wants. What about Ames? I asked, trying to sound super casual and not at all interested. Does he sleep around with a lot of girls? Annecy shot me a weird look. Why do you care about Ames? Why not? Well, he's not the alpha you might marry. Confused, I shook my head. He's got alpha written all over him. Didn't I hear someone say he should have been alpha? Me. It was me who said that, just now. Annecy lunged toward the dresser to straighten the little mirrors and perfume bottles that didn't need straightening. That's not how it works, Harlow. Blood runs thick through the pack. He's not of alpha blood, so I would keep your eyes off him if I were you. But he's why I ended up at that party to begin with. She shook her head hard. It doesn't matter. Did she not want to tell me about Ames because she wanted to protect me? I narrowed my eyes at the full moon mandala on the back of her robe. Can you tell me what happened to Ames and his dad? She huffed out a loud breath and turned to face me, her cheeks rosier than they had ever been. Let's have a glass of wine while I tell the story. It will help you sleep. I'll never say no to wine, I admitted. With a chuckle, she went to a little fridge built into the wall and pulled out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I had no idea that was even there, but I hadn't spent much time in the room since I'd been here. She poured us both a glass and then brought the bottle and the glasses back to the bed. She plunked down onto it, and I had the nostalgic feeling of hearing gossip while at a friend's sleepover. I crossed my legs under the covers and got comfortable. Stride is next in line to take over the pack, as you know, Annecy began in a whisper. But it wasn't a path that he wanted. He fought it for a long time. That was before the wolf killings started, though. They caused him to step up and be the alpha. I paused, my glass halfway to my lips. Wolf killings? She nodded. Ames's father, who was our previous alpha, died violently. That was Stride's uncle. They were close, Stride and his uncle, so Stride wants to spill blood for his uncle's death, too. Stride's uncle, as in Connolly's brother? Another nod. So the previous alpha, Connolly's brother, was killed. Awfully convenient for Connolly then to swoop in, marry the alpha's grieving widow, and put his son in place to rule. Ames's dad was murdered? I asked. That's what many people believe. And you? I sipped my wine. Is that what you believe? She shrugged. Maybe. It's hard to imagine who would do that, though. I've been a part of this pack all my life. I grew up with Ames and Stride. They used to be really close, more brothers than cousins, but I lifted my eyebrows. Now they seem like they're at each other's throats. There was some debate as to who should be the next alpha, Annecy said, smoothing the wrinkles from the covers with her palm. Despite what it seems like, Ames is quite loyal to Stride, as well as the pack, and always manages to have his back when he needs it, probably more than Stride deserves. Ames wants him to be a successful alpha, So he sticks close to Stride. So does Connolly. It sure sounded like Ames was the good to balance Connolly's bad. So, who do you think is killing the wolves? Annecy took a long drink from her glass before answering. No one knows. Not yet, anyway, but Stride is determined to find out. I nodded. Such drama, such angst. I had no idea wolves were like this. It was so different back when I read my books and assumed what I read was nothing but fiction. Now, I'd seen things with my own eyes, and it was fucking terrifying. Anyway, I should let you get some sleep. Annecy rose and shook the wine bottle. Want me to leave this with you? Yum, I said absently and took it from her. Thanks. Chuckling, she strode toward the door. Good night, Harlow. Once the door was closed behind her, I retrieved my phone from inside the bedside table and opened my texts. The message I'd sent Mom simply said, "Read," but there was no response. Impossible. There was no way on the entire planet Mom would have read my message and not responded to it or called me back. The wine I'd drunk sloshed in my stomach. Now I wasn't so sure if I should be more worried about her or me.